Immigration, it's the subject that has now climbed to number one in the chart of the issues that the great British public are most concerned about. And the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is announcing in the Commons tomorrow measures which seem to be copied from the Danish immigration system to try to deter people from crossing the channel, trying to deter people from seeking asylum in this country. Will they work? Because, frankly, whatever the last government didn't work. Whatever this government has done hasn't worked, because the number of people crossing the channel this year has already, in the middle of November, exceeded the number that crossed last year.
Mike, welcome. Just explain why you're announcing all of this today and not in Parliament tomorrow.
Let me take the mic for while you recover. Look, it's really important that the public fully understand how seriously we're taking this, and we accept that the public are fed up. We're fed up with the asylum shopping that's going on across Europe. That's one of the reasons you see so many in the north of France crossing over into the country. So what we're doing is we're making the package less attractive so that we can restore order and control to the immigration system. So it's a really big package of announcements that you're going to see from the Home Secretary tomorrow.
You seem to be copying a lot from the Danish immigration system. Are you?
Well, the Danish have done a really good job of restoring that order and control to their immigration system, and it's the right thing to do to learn from others that are having an impact. And so that's why we're bringing in some of these changes to make sure that that order is restored. And look, it's unacceptable if we are seen as the soft touch. Of course, we must help people. That's our duty. It's British values to be fair, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be firm. And that's what this package brings in. So, for example, Iain, we're looking at those who are here as asylum seekers, reviewing their claim every 2.5 years. That's down from 5 years. So just for the listeners, if the place that they've fled from is now safe, then they may be suitable to return there.
Will that be retrospective or just for new claimants from now on?
So this is anybody who's new that enters the country to take away that draw factor. But there's also a lot of other work going on, which we will have seen. You know, we've deported and removed nearly 50,000. Immigration enforcement arrests are up to the highest they've ever been in British history. That's a 63% increase. We've got returns deals with the French. And of course, we've got legislation still stuck in the Lords. The Conservatives are holding it up to take on the smuggling gangs with counter-terror powers.
But the returns deal with the French, I mean, that let's face it, that's not going too well, is it? When people you deport them and then they come back a couple of weeks later.
Well, it's a part of the solution to seed that doubt into migrants who are in Calais looking to cross. You know, if you're spending 10k with the risk of being immediately deported, you're less likely to. On the two that have come back, actually, that just shows the system's working, because we had their biometrics. We had their biometrics, identified them immediately. One's gone back, the other's going back very shortly. So it's a pointless journey.
Well, it may be, but you can understand why people ridicule a system where you deport somebody and then they reappear. It's clearly not a deterrent to them coming back.
Well, to those two, no, but they won't be coming again, because they're going to have to fork out thousands of pounds to come over, be identified again, and then deported immediately.
What about the issue of children? We had a text earlier saying, well, if an asylum seeker comes here and then makes a family, has sort of 2 or 3 children, and then their country is considered safe, what do you do then? Do you deport the children as well?
Well, look, if the country that they've come from is safe, then the person and their family can go back. It's a privilege.
Well, hang on a second.
Not a right to be in this country.
If the asylum seeker who's legitimately gained a refugee status, they marry an English person and then have children, and then 3 years later you say, well, that country is now safe for them to return to. I mean, it's a pretty inhumane to then say, and your wife, your partner, and the children, you have to leave them behind, or you take them with you.
Well, there is a route to settlement, of course, after 20 years, and there'll be a system where if you're contributing and if you're integrating, then that time can come down. It's important that people that come here do contribute to society and that they integrate, because that has been a part of the problem.
But, I mean, what is more integrated than marrying an English person and then having children with them?
And that's where the system, of course, will have flex for people to apply after a period of time and demonstrate they're integrating and that they're contributing.
You'll say that period is 20 years before they can get indefinite leave to remain.
So you'll see more detail coming out from the Home Secretary. But of course, within that 20 years, there will be ways of applying to prove that you're integrating and contributing.
If I'm a Labour backbencher who's very pro-immigration and accepts that there has to be sort of limits to immigration, but I hear some of the language that is being talked about, and particularly with regard to the Danish system, I'm going to be pretty uncomfortable with this, I suspect.
Well, I don't think the Danes are seen as unfair. It's about having a system that's fair, but also firm. And as a part of that, once we've retained that control and order, taken away those incentives to come here, we'll also be exploring safe and legal routes so that people that need help do receive it.
And are you ruling out also implementing the Danish system where they effectively decide where asylum seekers can or can't live?
Well, look, for me and for the Home Secretary and for the British people, I don't think it's about counting how many white or brown faces are in a community. Actually, it's about, are they integrating and are they contributing? That's what matters.
You didn't rule it out, though.
Well, I think I have there, haven't I?
Well, would you like to specifically say, I rule this out?
There's absolutely no way that we're going to be removing people because of the colour of their skin. It's about contributing and integrating.
No, but it's not about the colour of the skin. People seek asylum from countries that are predominantly white as well. Mm-hmm. We're not just talking about people with brown skin here, but the Danish system, I mean, Denmark is a very different country to ours. I think they only have 2,000 asylum seekers a year. We had 111,000 last year. So it's almost difficult to compare the two. But they do have this system where they say if there's more than 50% from a particular ethnic background, a new asylum seeker will not be housed in that community.
That's not something we're looking at. What's important is that people are provided with the opportunities, because when people come over, of course, they're less likely to be affluent, but we want them to have the opportunities to grow and then move to where they'd like, to other neighbourhoods, for example. And look, I think the Home Secretary is a perfect example of the success there coming from a migrant family.
Denmark also has very tight rules on family reunions. I gather that's something that you're looking at, but you haven't got firm proposals on. What are the dilemmas there?
That you'll hear more in the future on this. But what we're saying is, if you come over as an asylum seeker, it's not an automatic right to bring your family over. Of course, if the family's at risk, then they can apply, and that's where we'll be looking at more safe and legal routes once we've regained that control and order to the system.
Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, says that the only way that you can really attack this problem is to withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, the Home Secretary has made noises about seeking to reform the convention and also maybe encourage judges to interpret things rather differently to how they have in the past. Surely the simplest thing is to just come out of it altogether.
Well, firstly, the Conservatives have left us with this absolute mess of an immigration system and open borders, so we won't take lectures from them. They had 14 years to do what they say they're going to do now. The ECHR underpins trade deals, peace agreements and returns agreements. So if we came out, then it would have untold damage on the economy, but also the immigration system. So we're staying in, but we'll use our domestic laws to ensure it's interpreted in the right way, particularly Article 3 and 8, and also modern slavery laws, so that we can deport people that shouldn't be here.
These changes announced by Shabana Mahmood, I mean, they seem to be quite radical.
Well, not radical enough. They're a combination of a few small steps in the right direction and a handful of gimmicks. If they really wanted to fix the illegal migration crisis, the government would follow our advice, follow our plans, come out of the ECHR completely, and that would enable the government to deport all illegal immigrants within a week of arrival back to their country of origin, if safe or possible, a safe third country if not. And if they did that, pretty soon these crossings over the channel would stop. But they're too weak to do that. What in fact has happened is they cancelled the Rwanda deterrence scheme last summer of last year, just a few days before it was due to start. And as a result of that, channel crossings under Labour have surged. In fact, just in the 75 days that Shabana Mahmood has been Home Secretary, 10,000 illegal immigrants have crossed the channel. Labour's first year in office saw the highest ever number of asylum claims, 111,000. So Labour has lost control of our borders, and these proposals, while some of them are a step in the right direction, some of them are just gimmicks, they're not going to fix the problem.
I don't think there is one thing that could fix the problem as such, but you're not quite right to say that it's the highest ever level of crossings that this
asylum
year.
Claims, I said.
Asylum claims, fine, but crossings, it was higher in 2022, wasn't it? It's lower last year and lower the year before. That's absolutely right. But why do you have to leave the ECHR to do this? Because Germany seems to be quite successful in sending asylum seekers from Afghanistan back to Afghanistan. Denmark is doing this without any intention of coming out of the ECHR.
Well, as I understand it, according to the Times, Denmark has been unable to send anyone, for example, back to Syria, even though the Danish government wanted to do that. Of course, the way that our law works in the UK is that the Human Rights Act enables British courts to apply their interpretation of the ECHR. And the way that UK courts interpret the ECHR is often extremely expansive. So I'm going to give you one example where British courts found that an Iraqi drug dealer couldn't be sent back to Iraq because apparently he'd become too westernised. Or another example where the British court said a Zimbabwean paedophile couldn't be sent back to Zimbabwe because he might face hostility in Zimbabwe as a paedophile. That gives you two examples of ridiculous ECHR decisions made by UK courts. And that's just some of the reasons why we need to get rid of the ECHR completely, to enable us to remove people here illegally, to deport them, but also to deport within a week anybody crossing the channel illegally. And that means the deterrent effect would stop crossings pretty quickly, because if you're in France, why would you come over if you're going to get rapidly removed?
Can you name a single other European country that is considering doing this? Because, Greece and Italy have far bigger problems than we do with asylum seekers. In terms of numbers, they're not looking at doing this, as I understand it.
Well, 7 European countries, led by Italy, did ask a few months ago for fundamental reform of the ECHR.
That's different, isn't it?
And the President of the Council of Europe essentially said to them, no chance, it's not happening. Look, we're now outside the European Union. We can leave the ECHR, and we should do so because our borders crisis is so serious that we need to take quite radical action, and you can't take that radical action while in the ECHR.
A lot of the measures that the Home Secretary is announcing do seem to be a lot tougher than anything that the Conservatives announced during their time in government. You were in the Home Office latterly during that time. Aren't you running a risk that they're out-toughing you?
No, not really. It's the Labour government who cancelled the Rwanda removals deterrent just after the election, just days before it's due to start.
That's the second time you've used that phrase, Rwanda's removal deterrent.
Yeah.
I always argued it wasn't a deterrent. It was only a deterrent if, say, 70% of people who were crossing illegally faced the threat of going to Rwanda, not the odd couple of hundred here and there.
Well, the scheme, a couple of points, Ian. Firstly, that scheme was uncapped. Secondly, you've only got to remove pretty much everybody. You said 70%, but let's say some very high number, maybe even 90%. If you remove almost all the people who cross in the first month, then in the second month, then in the third month, by the time you come to the fourth month, people will pretty much stop trying. We saw something very similar work in Australia. They called it Operation Sovereign Borders about 12 years ago, where within about 3 or 4 months of starting something very similar, the illegal crossings to Australia completely stopped. And in fact, a similar thing has happened in America this year, where removing illegal immigrants crossing the US-Mexico border has resulted in a 90% reduction in illegal immigration into the USA within a matter of a small number of months. So the effect can be pretty quick. Anyway, Labour cancelled that before it started. The numbers crossing the channel surged as a result. In the 75 days since Shabana Mahmood has been Home Secretary, 10,000 illegal immigrants have crossed the English Channel. So we do need a proper deterrent. And what we're proposing, what we unveiled at the Conservative Party conference, was a lot tougher than what Shabana Mahmood is announcing today. We're coming out of the ECHR. She's saying she might tinker with Article 8. We're saying no illegal immigrants should be able to claim asylum, and they should all get deported within a week. She's saying,
to where?
Well, either back to their country of origin, if possible, or a safe third country, if not. And we would significantly raise the threshold for the definition of what counts as safe, because at the moment, people who, for example, have a sudden conversion to Christianity very conveniently, the current legal system says, you can't go to Iran if you've had this magical conversion to Christianity. Now, that is clearly, manufactured, and our legal system, shouldn't recognise that. There are, of course, some places that are genuinely dangerous for particular individuals, and we shouldn't return people there. But in those cases, we'll need a safe third country like Rwanda.
Now, she's also announcing that she will require judges to prioritise public safety over migrants' rights to a family life, or risk that they will face inhuman treatment if returned to their home country. Now, you presumably welcome that.
Well, we would go further. So those are both ECHR articles, and we would come out of the ECHR completely. So it wouldn't be a question of pleading with judges, as Shabana Mahmood appears to be doing. We would come out of the ECHR completely, so judges simply wouldn't have those measures available to them. You mentioned the second one there, which is Article 8. That is absolute. There is no law the UK Parliament can pass that can qualify Article 3 rather. There is no law the UK Parliament can pass that qualifies Article 3. So there is nothing she can do about that, which is one of the reasons we concluded we've got to leave the ECHR completely.
But she's effectively copying the Danish system, isn't she? Which everyone seems to think is the toughest in Europe. Why do you think that is a bad idea?
Well, some of these are small steps in the right direction, along with some gimmicks as well. Well, I think, for example, making asylum grants temporary and then reviewing them every few years is a good idea. But we would say for illegal immigrants, they shouldn't even be able to claim asylum in the first place. So even though that is a small step in the right direction, it's not tough enough when it comes to illegal immigrants. Look, in terms of the Danish comparison...
But just on that, though, the refugee charities are saying that that's actually cruel because it means that people who legitimately claim asylum and are granted asylum can never really lay down proper roots.
Well, I mean, I think protection is supposed to be temporary, and it's not supposed to be a permanent migration route. The idea of asylum is people who are genuinely fleeing danger can get some refuge. That does not imply they should get the permanent right to live in a particular country. There are other immigration routes to do that.
So do you think indefinite leave to remain should be abolished then?
We're not proposing to abolish indefinite leave to remain. What we are saying is that for people who enter this country illegally, they shouldn't even be able to claim asylum, definitely never get ILR. So illegal entry, frankly, those people need to be deported immediately. For people who arrive legally, whether they subsequently get asylum or not, there should be a much longer path. We say 10 years, and accompanying that should be conditions. So even after 10 years, they should be to have to demonstrate they're making a contribution to British, a financial contribution to British society, not have claimed benefits, not have committed any crime, earned over a certain level, because I don't think it's reasonable that people who don't make a contribution or who, heaven forbid, do commit a crime should be allowed to stay permanently.